financial woes are far from over. So far, Shehbaz Sharif has blamed his predecessor for this. He says Imran Khan gave him a stagnated economy. The question is, how long will this claim hold? In just a year from now, the country will be heading to the polls, and by all means, that's not enough time to fix Pakistan's economy. Simply put, Shehbaz Sharif will have to do more than blame Imran Khan for the country's woes. For starters, he will have to finalize a cabinet at the earliest. It's almost been 5 days since he was elected. He hasn't been able to finalize a cabinet yet because the coalition partners are not on the same page. The Pakistan People's Party, for instance, which is Bilawal Bhutto Zardari's party, is apparently reluctant to join the cabinet because of divisions within its ranks. Some PPP leaders do not want to take ministries and are seeking electoral reforms instead. Others are hesitant because they feel the coalition will not even last 2 months. MQMP, another party in the coalition, is also in two minds. Reports say MQMP leaders have also decided to not join the federal cabinet. It's true what they say. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. There could be no better description of Shehbaz Sharif's situation right now. He may have secured the country's top post, but given the differences within the coalition, he is going to find it incredibly tough to hold on to office. The political drama is set to continue, and we will keep following the twists and turns. On to Sri Lanka now. Just how bad can the economic crisis get? Every day we see a new low. Today was no different. Sri Lanka has started rationing fuel. Starting today, motorcycles can get just 4 liters of fuel per visit. Three-wheelers can get just 5 liters every time they refill. Cars, vans and SUVs, a little more than 19 liters. That's all they can get. Even with the daily cap, there is no guarantee people will be able to get fuel because most fuel stations are out of fuel. The fuel stations that are still open have to deal with long queues. Nothing explains the crisis in Sri Lanka better than the situation at the fuel stations. People have died waiting for fuel in long queues. Since last month, at least 8 deaths have been recorded.
Sri Lanka Ceylon Petroleum Corporation today announced officially that it is planning to ration fuel across the country. However, many fuel stations run by the CPC, as you can see right behind me, has run out of petrol and diesel. Nevertheless, citizens across the country, in a desperate move, are even willing to stand in line for hours, at times even exceeding 2 hours, to obtain the bare minimum of fuel here in the country. Sri Lanka has been reporting shortages of not only fuel but also of gas and certain commodities over the past few months due to its worsening economic crisis.
There is a shortage of cooking gas as well. Sri Lanka's main gas retailer, Litro Gas, is completely out of stock. It has stopped supplying. The company says it hopes to resume the supply on Monday. The chairman of Litro Gas has resigned. His name is Theshara Jayasinghe. He is considered to be a strong ally of the Rajapaksas. The bigger worry, however, is the serious shortage of medicines. Doctors around the country have been issuing dire warnings. Sri Lanka imports 80% of its drugs. The government provides 2,500 drugs to the state-run hospitals. Out of this, 60 medicines are completely out of stock. 20 of these are life-saving drugs. As of last week, another 140 essential drugs are in short supply. The Sri Lankan government also owes money to suppliers of medical goods. How much? Almost $13 million. Reports say the World Bank has agreed to provide an immediate grant of $10 million. This is exclusively for the purchase of drugs. But these funds may not be enough. There are two reasons. One, Sri Lanka has devalued its currency. Two, the high rate of inflation. The cost of medical supplies has already increased by 30 to 40%. One can survive without petrol for a few days, but the shortage of drugs could create a dangerous situation. It can put lives at risk. What does Sri Lanka need to stabilize supplies? At least $3 billion. That's what Colombo plans to demand from the International Monetary Fund. The meeting is next week. Sri Lanka wants an immediate release of funds, and it wants the IMF to get involved on another issue: the negotiations with the creditors. Sri Lanka wants them to settle the debts for less. Colombo may ask investors to take a loss. How much loss? 50% on interest payments and another 20% on the principal. Perhaps Sri Lanka wants the IMF's help to convince the creditors. Sri Lanka's Finance Minister, Ali Sabri, had a message for them. I'm quoting, "If you have been part of our prosperity and made money out of it, when we are not doing well, you need to take some sort of a haircut." That's going to be a long, protracted discussion. So will the creditors pay for the mistakes of the Rajapaksa government? We will have to see how the discussions with the IMF pan out next week, but it will not be a pleasant conversation, that's for sure. You see, the IMF will not just hand out a check to Sri Lanka. It will seek commitment towards tangible reforms, perhaps even guarantors. Colombo could be looking towards New Delhi for some assistance. The Sri Lankan government has made a diplomatic outreach. First, the Sri Lankan High Commissioner met with India's Finance Minister in New Delhi. Next week, the Sri Lankan Finance Minister is expected to be in Washington. Reports say he will be meeting with the members of the Indian delegation on the sidelines. New Delhi has already dropped a hint. It might extend more financial aid to Colombo. We will know more next week, and we will be tracking all these developments. Shanghai is going through a crisis as well. The Wuhan virus outbreak there has got out of hand. Quarantine sites are running out of space. So the local officials are forcing people to surrender their homes. Their apartments are being turned into quarantine centers. The move has led to a strong backlash, one that is rarely seen in China. Our next report getting you the details.
They were kicked, shoved, and pushed aside. Residents of this apartment building put up a brave fight. Their homes are being turned into a quarantine center. Outraged by the move, the locals tried to stop these cops in hazmat suits. Unable to handle dissent, the cops did what they know best. They cracked down on the residents. The Wuhan virus has brought Shanghai to its knees. 3 weeks into the lockdown, the city is still struggling to cope with the surging infections. The quarantine centers are running out of space. At this makeshift hospital in Shanghai, the patients sleep in camp beds. Yu Beibei was recently placed in a similar makeshift hospital. She wasn't even given proper medical treatment.
There is no medicine or injection treatment in the shelter. So far, all we have is a self-healing treatment scheme. The doctors would come to take our temperature every morning and afternoon to see if it is normal. Then we will fill in their survey on mobile phones and write down whether we feel unwell together with our temperature, that's all. Bathrooms are not very clean, which is understandable because so many people use them and volunteers or cleaners can't keep up. So they are a little dirty. Also, we haven't found a place with a hot shower. Lights are on throughout whole nights and it's hard to fall asleep. These three things are what people have complained about the most.
China's zero COVID-19 strategy has failed, but Beijing still continues to stick with it. The anger and frustration of the Shanghai residents is growing by the day. Locked inside their homes, they are running out of essentials like food, and supplies are hard to come by. This week, some Chinese officials were out on an inspection. One local decided to let his anger out. From inside his home, he shouted at the officials. The opposition to zero COVID is growing. Some people in Shanghai have openly defied lockdown orders. They have been arrested and detained. In January, the local police registered just 59 cases and made 26 arrests. This was for violation of pandemic rules. The numbers shot up exponentially in March. More than 600 cases were recorded last month, with 150 arrests. The public backlash poses a direct challenge to the Communist Party. Authorities in Shanghai are moving to crush public dissent. They have now vowed to strictly enforce lockdown rules. That could mean more arrests and punishment for those who dare to question the zero-COVID strategy.
Our next story is about the United Kingdom, which gave the world the most number of Independence Days. No kidding here. The British colonized half the world. They ruled a total of 65 nations. It's been centuries. Their empires have crumbled, but their colonial mindset has not. Let me tell you why we say this. The United Kingdom has introduced a new scheme, a scheme to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. A scheme Britain's Home Secretary has proudly described as a world first. Critics, however, describe it as inhumane and evil. We'll discuss that in a bit. First, the story. On Thursday, Priti Patel, Britain's Home Secretary, travelled to Rwanda's capital. She met the country's foreign minister and signed a new agreement on migration. A pact to provide immigrants a one-way ticket to Rwanda. Here's how it will work. The UK asylum seekers will be packed onto the next ship or flight and sent to Rwanda, a country located 4,000 miles away in Central Africa. Once there, the fate of these migrants, whether they get to stay or leave, will be decided under Rwandan laws and by the Rwandan government. And even if the migrants win asylum, they will only be able to stay in Rwanda for just 5 years, post which they will have to find shelter elsewhere. Speaking about this scheme, the British Home Secretary called it the world's first such plan, which will make the immigration system fairer. You must listen to this.
And today, our approach as two outward-looking countries has led to the signing of a new international partnership, which is a world first. It is a migration and economic development partnership with the country of Rwanda and the UK. Working together, the United Kingdom and Rwanda will help make the immigration system fairer, ensure that people are safe, and enjoy new opportunities to flourish. We have agreed that people who enter the UK illegally will be considered for relocation to Rwanda to have their asylum claims decided.
The Prime Minister of the UK is also quite excited about this deal. Delivering an address in Kent, Boris Johnson called it an innovative approach which will disrupt the business model of smugglers. Listen in.
So from today, our new migration and economic development partnership will mean that anyone entering the UK illegally, as well as those who have arrived illegally since January the 1st, may now be relocated to Rwanda. This innovative approach, driven by our shared humanitarian impulse and made possible by Brexit freedoms, will provide safe and legal routes for asylum while disrupting the business model of the gangs.
Now here's the thing. The UK has every right to deport illegal immigrants, but sending asylum seekers to one of the world's poorest countries with one of the worst records on human rights violations is simply cruel. From Britain's opposition to human rights groups, even the United Nations, everyone has condemned the scheme and called it inhumane. Keir Starmer, the Labour Party leader, has called the plan extortionate and unworkable. He says not only will it ruin the lives of asylum seekers, but will also cost British taxpayers billions of pounds. Jeremy Corbyn, the former Labour leader, says the plan is shameful and beyond cruel. They have both described it as a political tool to distract the British citizens from the country's current political mess. The UN Human Rights Council has also issued a statement. It says people fleeing persecution deserve compassion and empathy. They should not be traded like commodities. It has also warned the UK that such a deal will only magnify risks, causing refugees to seek alternatives and unsafe routes. A number of human rights activists have also spoken. They have drawn parallels between the UK's plan and a similar plan that was drawn out by Australia. They say such schemes only inflict huge amounts of cruelty on the migrants rather than rehabilitating them.
We have years of evidence from Australia about precisely this policy measure, which has done nothing to stop people coming to Australia seeking asylum, has inflicted a huge amount of cruelty on a relatively small number of people, basically imprisoned for years and years on islands in the South Pacific, and all at enormous cost to the Australian taxpayer.
Despite the criticism, the Boris Johnson government remains unrelenting. It says it has already paid the Rwandan government $158 million up front. What is this money meant for? It is going to be used to pay for housing and integration of the migrants. Now, here's the thing. There is no guarantee if this money will be used to help the migrants. There is also no guarantee if the migrants will be treated fairly. Like I said, Rwanda's record on human rights is abysmal, and one does not have to look far to find evidence. The United Kingdom has itself condemned Rwanda on numerous occasions. January 2021, UK's Director General for Europe told the UNHRC that his country remains concerned about Rwanda's continued restrictions on civil and political rights. Then in July 2021, UK's International Ambassador for Human Rights appeared before the same body and expressed regret that Rwanda was not conducting a transparent and credible probe into allegations of human rights violations. The same United Kingdom now expects Rwanda to rehabilitate refugees. There could not be a better example of British hypocrisy. Much like the United States, it claims to be the torch-bearer of diversity, a civilized society which believes in inclusion. Its actions, however, tell a very different story. Let's now discuss what's becoming the biggest boardroom battle of 2022. The bid by Elon Musk to take over Twitter. He made the move yesterday. In 24 hours, we've already seen a lot of twists and turns. Let's bring you up to speed with the latest for now. Elon Musk seriously wants to buy Twitter. He is willing to pay almost $43 billion for it. That means a price of around $54 per share. Twitter's market value is around $36 billion today. So Musk is offering to pay about $7 billion extra. Twitter's board of directors said to be considering the offer. The board has pulled in Wall Street bank Goldman Sachs to help out. But the company's CEO, Parag Agrawal, says they will not be held hostage by Musk. He held a 25-minute question and answer session with the employees. Some statements have come out. Here is what Agrawal told the Twitter employees. This provides all of us with this moment where we feel distracted, where we feel a loss of control. I am personally going to spend my time focusing on things I can control, and I believe it will matter. I don't believe we are being held hostage. What do those words tell you? Looks like Twitter will not bow down to the whims of Elon Musk that easily, but do they have any alternative? They do, but it's not an easy one. It's called a poison pill. Twitter's board is seriously considering this one. What is a poison pill? In the business world, it is called a shareholder rights plan. It's a common defense strategy for companies facing hostile bids. They offer more shares to existing shareholders at a discount. How would this work in Twitter's case? Right now, Elon Musk is the largest shareholder of Twitter. If Twitter takes the poison pill, it would offer more shares to other shareholders, put them in a stronger position compared to Elon Musk. That could even mean looking for a new owner.
If the board says no, as a fiduciary, they'll be eating lawsuits for breakfast. So this is going to force the board to do a strategic process, look for another bid. But this, in my opinion, is the current Twitter story with the clock striking midnight. One way or another, we believe the company is going to be sold.
Can Twitter survive this? Will it really be sold? It might be too early to make that assessment, but some shareholders of Twitter are speaking out. They are rejecting Elon Musk's offer in public. One of them is Saudi Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. He says, I'm quoting, "I don't believe that the proposed offer by Elon Musk comes close to the intrinsic value of Twitter given its growth prospects. Being one of the largest and long-term shareholders of Twitter, I reject this offer." Musk was quick to shoot off a tweet to respond. Here is what he said. Interesting, just two questions, if I may. How much of Twitter does the kingdom own, directly and indirectly? What are the kingdom's views on journalistic freedom of speech? Obviously, the attempt was to embarrass Saudi Arabia on the issue of human rights and free speech. But should Musk be the man to decide what is free speech or not? Already, people are expressing doubts over his ability to run a platform like Twitter. Critics say Musk is doing this not to promote free speech, but to have a say on who gets attention. Already, he has been sued by the shareholders. They say Musk failed to disclose his stake in time and made materially false and misleading statements and omissions, quote unquote. Despite the opposition, Musk refuses to back down. What if the shareholders reject his offer to acquire Twitter? Elon Musk says he has a plan B, but he did not share the specifics. Either way, this has become an ugly boardroom battle, one that is playing out both on Twitter and in real life. Whichever way this goes, one thing is certain: neither Musk nor Twitter will come out unscathed. Today is a special day for the three Abrahamic faiths, a rare alignment of Easter, Passover and Ramzan, a time for prayers and family gatherings for Christians, Jews and Muslims. But the day, which should fuel a flurry of interfaith celebrations, has ignited violent clashes at one of the most symbolic and holiest sites in the world, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It has once again become a chronic flashpoint in the protracted Israel-Palestine conflict. Our next report telling you what happened.
These are the scenes from inside Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque on the first Friday of Ramzan. Tens of thousands of Muslims gathered for early morning prayers. The Israel security forces entered the mosque compound and violent clashes followed. Stones pelted, rubber bullets fired, even grenades were thrown. The clashes, which began at around 5:30 a.m. local time, lasted for more than 3 hours. Over 150 Palestinians and several Israeli officers were left injured. This marks the first face-off in the area since the start of Ramzan. Like every story, this too has two different versions. Israeli police say dozens of masked men marched into the mosque setting off fireworks. Witnesses say Palestinians threw stones at Israeli forces first, while the Palestinians say the Israeli forces tried to empty the compound. The police allegedly attacked the mosque staff and people who came to pray.
هذا القمع وهذا البربرية التي قام بها الاحتلال من أجل قمع شعبنا وتفريغ المسجد الأقصى المبارك على مرأى ومسمع من العالم أجمع، فنحن نستنكر بشدة هذه ما حصل، ويجب على العالم الذي رأى على كل شاشات العالم هذه البربرية التي استخدمها الاحتلال في قمع شعبنا الآمنين الذين أتوا من أجل أداء صلاة الفجر، وتم قمعهم واعتقال الشبان والاعتداء على المصلين.
The Palestinian Prisoners Club reports that around 400 people were arrested after the clashes. What explains this spate of violence? There isn't one single reason. A lot of factors are at play. The first is that this is a holy month. 3 religious festivals are overlapping: Ramzan, Easter and Passover. the holiest festivals for Muslims, Christians and Jews. Each year around this time, tensions flare up. There are processions, which turn into clashes and eventually lead to violence. This played out in 2021 and the year before. This time around, things are no different. The second reason is policing tactics. Several roads in Palestinian territories are being closely guarded by Israeli police. Israel says this is only for security purposes to keep a check on religious processions. The Palestinians don't agree. They consider this bullying, a way to curb religious expression. Several Palestinians complain that the security checks are stopping them from offering prayers on time.
I arrived to the checkpoint with my sister and other women. They let my sister in. They said, "You have to return. You won't be allowed in." Why? They said, "Just go back. I have been waiting here for 2 hours. I don't know why."
The third reason behind the unrest is a spate of terror attacks on Israeli citizens. Since March 22nd, there have been at least 4 major attacks on Israeli citizens. This has made the Israeli security forces spring into action as the Prime Minister of Israel announced a new offensive.
The state of Israel will do everything necessary to overcome this terrorism. We will settle accounts with everyone who was linked, either directly or indirectly, to the attacks.
Palestinians claim Israel is also targeting civilians. They point at the killings of 2 women and a teenager who were recently shot dead in the West Bank. Israel says they were all perpetrators of terror. Palestinians say they were innocent civilians. Bureau Report. WION. World is One.
It's April, a month every employee waits for because it marks the beginning of the increment season, the season to get rewarded for your hard work. Employers around the world are conducting appraisal interviews. Employees are holding their breath for a pay hike, preparing a list of their achievements in the year that passed. Conventional wisdom holds the top performers get rewarded. They walk away with the best pay hikes. Perform and prosper is the mantra. What if I told you that this year, this mantra may not apply? What if I tell you that inflation could spoil your increment this year? Most employers say that compensation is incredibly complicated right now, thanks not only to high inflation rates, but also to a tight labor market, thanks to the ongoing quitting streak the world over. I'll start with inflation. It is surging globally. In the developed world, 60% of the countries have inflation rates over 5%. This is according to the Bank for International Settlements. In Britain, inflation stands at 7%, the highest in 30 years. In Germany, it has hit 7.3%, the highest in 40 years. And in the United States, inflation has climbed to 8.5%, the highest rate since 1981. As the developed economies suffer, the developing world is also feeling the pinch. Reports say more than half the countries in Asia and Africa have inflation rates above 7%. Only China and Japan are notable exceptions, with a 0.9% and 0.8% inflation rate respectively. What about India? It's in a fix as well. According to the most recent estimates, the inflation rate in India stands at 6.95%. That's the highest since October 2020. What is driving this surge? Well, there are multiple reasons. The foremost being the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. They have burdened supply chains, slowed down production, led to a spike in oil prices, also a spike in food prices. Combined together, these factors are making economies suffer. So how exactly will this impact your increments? What's the link here? You see, when things get expensive, everyone starts cost cutting, and this applies to every sector. Companies adjust compensation plans to keep up with inflation. They reconsider their salary budgets to match economic projections. According to a Willis Towers Watson survey, American employers will pay an average 3.4% raise to their workers this year. Another reason for this is the Great Resignation. It is showing no signs of stopping. People the world over are quitting. In America, nearly 4.3 million people quit their jobs in January 2022. In India, a LinkedIn survey says 82% of the workforce is considering changing jobs this year. These are extraordinary figures, and they have put employers in a fix. They are apprehensive about increasing salaries, knowing their employees might quit soon. And so they are treading carefully and mulling other options, like a one-time cash bonus, a better variable pay, or health benefits. Will these strategies work? They might just, but only if you choose to be transparent about them. If you are an employer facing this dilemma, if your compensation framework is driven by markets, consider delivering a fair message to the employees. Acknowledge the problems you are facing and be honest about your plans. Our next story is about Joe Biden, the President of the United States, and a self-proclaimed gaffe machine. In 2018, Biden confessed that he is prone to gaffes. 4 years on, he is only living up to what he said. At a recent event in North Carolina, he appeared to be shaking hands with no one. Quite literally, he turned around after his speech and shook hands with thin air. The gaffe has opened a can of worms. American citizens are saying their president needs help. Here's a report.
Joe Biden is a gaffe machine. We're not saying this. The US president himself admitted this in 2018. Announcing his bid for the 2020 presidential race, he himself acknowledged his gaffe-prone nature, but stressed that he's the most qualified person to run the country. Not sure about whether he's lived up to the promise, but his gaffes have certainly not ended. At a recent gathering in North Carolina, the 79-year-old US president delivered an arousing speech and then turned around to shake hands with thin air. Watch how. The video has since gone viral, and Twitter users are having a field day. Some say he was shaking hands with his voter base. Others say it was John Cena. And yet others are pointing out how this wasn't the first time. How the US president has on numerous occasions shaken hands with absolutely no one. The handshake gaffe is certainly chucklesome, but it's just one among many, from slips of tongue to falling asleep to abusing on mic. Biden has done it all. At last year's COP26 climate summit, Biden fell asleep for more than 30 seconds. He was then woken by a staff member and then proceeded to applaud as if he listened to the entire speech. This was last year. Biden was caught on a hot mic, cursing a Fox News reporter at a White House event. On another occasion, he called Kamala Harris the president instead of vice president. On yet another occasion, he called her the first lady.
In the arrangement, who's on the stage because of the first lady's husband.
Sometimes he gets confused, trying to find his way off the stage. Embarrassing or not, Biden's gaffes help him stay in the headlines more than his actual policies ever do. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Let's now tell you what else made news. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
Russia's guided missile cruiser Moskva sinks in the Black Sea after being damaged, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. Ukraine has claimed a successful missile attack on the warship. Fighter jets from the Netherlands have now arrived in Bulgaria. The country will host a joint air policing mission with the Bulgarian Air Force as part of NATO's efforts to secure its eastern flank amid rising tensions with Russia. Amid the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Egypt has approved India as a wheat supplier to meet domestic demand. Egypt is one of the world's largest wheat importers.
Where that leads, I think.
CIA Director William Burns has warned that Russia's setbacks in Ukraine could lead President Vladimir Putin to resort to using a tactical or low-yield nuclear weapon, which no one should take lightly. Somalia's newly elected lawmakers were sworn in after a long-delayed voting process that was marred by deadly violence and a power struggle between the country's top leaders. Security was tight as nearly 300 members of the lower and upper houses of parliament took the oath of office. Firefighters have contained a massive blaze at a Central California food processing plant that prompted authorities to evacuate thousands of residents, while forcing some to stay inside their homes. NASA attempted a fueling test of its Mega Moon rocket, but had to halt the operation because of a hazardous hydrogen leak. It was NASA's third attempt at a dress rehearsal on the launch pad, a required step ahead of a test flight to the moon. Satellite images show the devastating impact of recent flooding on parts of Durban in South Africa, which has left about 400 people dead as the search continues for missing people. Joe Root has stepped down as England's Test captain. Pressure has been growing on the 31-year-old to resign after back-to-back series defeats against Australia and West Indies. Root made the decision on Friday, citing the toll the role has had on him off the pitch. Barcelona have been knocked out of the Europa League after a shock defeat to Eintracht Frankfurt. The first leg of the quarter-final tie ended level, but the German side stunned the title favourites by taking a 3-goal lead at the Nou Camp. Xavi's side did reduce the deficit in the closing stages, but it was too little, too late.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.
गया नहीं अभी तक? गाड़ी की सर्विस कब से ड्यू है यार? ये थोड़ी जाएंगे कहीं, ये तो गाड़ी की सर्विस करवाने के लिए कहीं जाने की जरूरत नहीं है। चिल, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है। गो मैकेनिक पर पाए एक्सपर्ट कार सर्विसेज, 50 पॉइंट इंस्पेक्शन और 3 महीने की अनकंडीशनल वारंटी। डाउनलोड करें इंडिया का नंबर 1 कार सर्विसेज ऐप गो मैकेनिक।
गो मैकेनिक।
मुझे कभी नहीं लगता था लोग इस मैच को देख पाएंगे। 5G की टेक्नोलॉजी से ये आप तक पहुंच जाएगा, उसको मैं शब्दों में बयान नहीं कर सकता। हाय, मैं यहाँ आपके सामने खड़ा हूँ या शायद हूँ ही नहीं।
Every second the hologram stays on the stage, more than 1 gigabits per second of data is being pinged wirelessly.
This is how people will watch sports in the future.
कोई क्रिकेट को इस तरह भी देख पाएगा, ये कभी सोचा नहीं था।
Israel claims to have destroyed a rocket launching site used by the Hamas.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made no mention of any halt to the offensive.
We at WION have tracked this story from the word go.
WION reports on the latest health threat before the world.
People diagnosed with the coronavirus in Russia may be deported back to their home countries.
The looting started early Saturday.
South Africa is witnessing riots.
Hoping through a Taliban patrol now.
Hours of non-stop live broadcast. The most extensive coverage. Biggest team of reporters on ground.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the world's biggest vaccination drive. India will have nearly 120 million doses.
We know that our shared planet is changing for the worse.
We need constructive dialogue. It's time, it's time, it's time.
Protests like these are now a frequent
A friendship that has stood the test of time, dehyphenating geopolitical equations and focusing on bilateral issues.
Place where I'm standing.
site of the opening battle. As you can see, the reserve forces are getting ready. They're picking up the weapons here.
Ringside, Ukrainian military drills. The Ukraine conflict is intensifying. WION brings you all sides of the story.
The reserve forces are
One of the many
getting
protest
ready. They're
marches
picking up the weapons and they will
It's code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. Wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time. Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God help us all if you fail to prove us wrong. God help us.
One trillion species. 7.8 billion humans. 1.9 million species extinct. One planet. Where are we heading? What should we do? Watch Climate Tracker, only on WION. World is one.
From the world's most volatile region, conflicts over faith and boundaries. Stories of death, destruction, despair, and hope. WION brings you to the heart of the action. Incisive analysis, unrivaled perspective, and exclusive ground reports. Watch West Asia Post every Friday, 8:30 p.m. IST with me, Radi Francis. Only on WION, World is One.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIOnews.com. World is One.
You are watching WION, World is One. Thank you very much for staying with us and welcome back. We are glad you're watching. My name is Eric Njoka. Let's begin with the top stories at this hour. Pentagon says Russia's Moskva warship was hit by 2 Ukrainian missiles before it sunk in the Black Sea and called it a big blow for Moscow. China must pay a greater price for backing Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a senior United States senator says during a trip to Taiwan in which American lawmakers vowed that Washington would not abandon the island. More than 150 people are wounded in clashes between Palestinian demonstrators and Israeli police at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. South Korea will remove most of its coronavirus restrictions later this month, including limits on indoor gatherings as case numbers continue to fall. Twitter moves to defend itself against Elon Musk's $43 billion hostile takeover bid, announcing a plan that would allow shareholders to purchase additional stock. And Joe Root resigns as England's Test captain after a roller coaster 5-year term that ended in a torrid run of results, including an Ashes drubbing and defeat in the West Indies. The situation in Shanghai is going from bad to worse. It has been over 2 years since the world was first introduced to the COVID-19 pandemic. It started in China's Wuhan city and slowly spread to the rest of the world. During this time, we have seen a shift from the initial zero-tolerance approach lockdowns to accepting a life with the virus, a gradual return to normalcy. But for the Chinese, the original center of the coronavirus, not much has changed in these months. Beijing is still continuing with its draconian COVID containment measures, a policy that is very evidently backfiring in its financial capital, Shanghai, triggering public anger, frustration, and distress. Shanghai, the financial capital of China, has become the latest epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic for the Asian nation. In the last few weeks, nearly 25 million of its residents have been put under complete lockdown. Businesses have been declared closed. There is a shortage in food, medicine, water and essential supplies. And if the situation was not troubling enough, the authorities are now using force to make sure that people follow the extreme rules. The video on your screen is from the Pudong district. Dressed in hazmat suits, Chinese officials can be seen scuffling with the residents. A few seconds into the video, we can see a man being dragged by the authorities. A woman is screaming and crying, kneeling on the ground. Cries of letting the elderly be. The video was posted on Chinese social media. The user who put it said that the local government requisitioned several residential buildings in the county, which will now be turned into isolation centers as infection figures continue to climb. Another user said that at first only empty residential complexes were used as isolation centers. But with spike in COVID cases, they are forcing people out of their rented apartments.
All of us here are residents who abide by the law. We are willing to do something for the country. You forbade us from gathering or to head out anywhere outside, and we have complied. But now you want to place infected patients with high transmissibility rates less than 20 meters away from some residential areas. What do you want us, the common folk, to do?
The next video that we will show you is from an isolation center. There are hundreds of people cramped into quarantine facilities. They are separated by less than an arm's length. For the last few days, Shanghai's COVID cases have floated around the 20,000 mark. This is no small number, and with China's strict COVID policy, every person is to be isolated in a state-run setup. There is no home isolation, and in the view of the Shanghai outbreak, many diplomatic missions have also issued guidelines for their staff. The United States has urged its non-essential staff at the Shanghai consulate to leave the city. The Indian consulate in Shanghai was also announced inaccessible in person on Thursday. The statement issued said that the consulate will not be in position to provide consular services in person, but will remain operational in remote mode. And for more insight on this story, we earlier spoke to journalist Peter Catterall from Beijing, and this is what he had to say.
Really, since the initial outbreak in Wuhan, China's been pursuing what they call dynamic zero COVID, which, in theory allows them to maintain, normality in your daily life. However, if cases arrive, then there are these really stringent measures that get put in place. I've experienced this when there are local outbreaks in the city that you're living in. Certain freedoms that you have are no longer available to you. And so in Shanghai, if you test positive for COVID, then you are obligated to go to a centralized quarantine facility. And in cases that people are unwilling to go, then they will come get you. There's other cases of clashes with police, which emerged today. In order to cope with the number of positive cases, authorities have been requiring more space to house them and more beds. And they have actually closed off the National Expo building, which is there in Shanghai, for this purpose, which gives them an additional 50,000 beds. But they have also been designating some residential compounds as necessary for additional quarantine centers. And they've been asking the local residents to relocate during this time. And of course, the local people are not too thrilled with that idea. And there's been some pretty, remarkable videos being shared on domestic social media today showing these clashes, which again is not something that is commonly seen in China.
Staying with our COVID-19 coverage, coronavirus infections are on the rise in India's capital. New Delhi reported 325 new infections on Thursday, the highest single-day jump in cases in the last 40 days. As per the numbers put out by the Delhi government, the capital's positivity rate stands at 2.39%, a sharp spike from 0.5% last week. As per a report, there also has been a 48% rise in home isolation cases in the national capital in the last 1 week. Now, according to reports, the Delhi Disaster Management Authority will hold a meeting on the 20th of April to discuss measures to prevent the spread of coronavirus in the city. The Delhi government has also issued a fresh COVID advisory for schools. Students and teachers at all private schools have been instructed to wear masks and adhere to social distancing. Schools have also been asked to inform the state if any COVID infection is detected, and also suggested closing down the schools where infections appear if required. The infection surge comes just a few days after Delhi government scrapped its mandatory outdoor mask policy, although it has advised people to wear a mask, but those without one in public spaces will not be fined any longer. Now, given the recent uptick in cases, doctors in the city have urged people not to panic and adhere to virus control norms as much as possible. Days after a dramatic change in guard, political tensions continue to simmer across Islamabad. The now ousted Imran Khan government has not given up. They are holding mega rallies, still claiming of a foreign conspiracy to topple their government and crumbling of the incumbent joint opposition in near future. On the Islamabad crisis, our Pakistan Bureau Chief Anas Malik sat down with former Information Minister Fawad Chaudhry for an exclusive interview. Watch.
I have with me Mr. Fawad Hussain Chaudhry, the former Information Minister for the Imran Khan government, the former Science and Technology Minister. Sir, thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to WION. First question, the military has now rebuked the claims by Mr. Khan, the former Prime Minister, about a conspiracy or foreign conspiracy. What do you have to say on that?
I think ISP has just confirmed the existence of letter and the internal conspiracy. So I think they have just confirmed that.
So you don't think so that there is a rebuke on that?
I don't think so. They have just confirmed what we said. They just confirmed what National Security Council said. They just reiterated the statement of National Security Council, and I believe that this is what Prime Minister Imran Khan exactly used same words later on. So they just confirmed that there was an internal, in our Pakistan's political affairs, there was foreign intervention, and they also said it's a blatant one.
Sir, relations with India have been literally on a sticky wicket when the previous PTI government was in power. There were approachments, and lastly, then there was some sort of a settlement in form of that ceasefire that was agreed upon between the two militaries. Prime Minister Khan, in his last address, as the Prime Minister, has been exclaiming and rooting on how good the Indian foreign policy has been and how independent it has been. And now, just days back in the Peshawar Jalsa, he said that it was India and Israel who are much more happier with his ouster. So this is not a backtrack from his position.
If you remove the context from any quote, obviously it will give you a different meaning. He praised Indian policy vis-a-vis West, where he said they refused to come to West in case of Russia and relationship with other countries. They tried to have their independent policy.
How optimistic you are that elections will be held soon, or how soon will they be held, in your opinion?
I think in 8 weeks. I think elections should be announced in 8 weeks.
Why 8 weeks? Because the government says that they've just taken power.
I think they will not be able to survive more than 8 weeks.
That's how big the momentum would be on the streets?
Yeah, that's how the momentum is, and that's how this country cannot afford to go on like that more than 8 weeks.
Tensions between Israel and Palestine, which have been rising for the past few weeks, have finally boiled over. Over 150 people have been injured after clashes between Palestinians and Israeli security forces broke out at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque today morning. This is the first face-off in the area since start of Ramzan. Israeli police say dozens of masked men marched into the mosque chanting and setting off fireworks before throwing stones towards the Western Wall. It is considered the holiest site where Jews can pray. Israeli police say that at least 3 of their officers have been hurt in the clashes. The visuals on the screen show the smoke billowing around the mosque as the explosion detonated in the holy site. This comes after the stun grenades were fired by the Israeli police, and many Palestinians inside the mosque appeared to clash with the Israeli security forces. Tensions are high because Israel has been carrying out arrests and military raids in West Bank after 4 attacks in Israel in the past 3 weeks killed 14 people, most of them civilians. Some of the attacks in Israel were carried out by Arab citizens linked to the Islamic State group. Others were Palestinians, which were cheered on by militant groups like Hamas. In that same period of time, however, at least 18 Palestinians have been killed in the raids conducted by Israeli forces, including children. The site of today's clashes, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, is Islam's 3rd holiest site. Jews refer to it as Temple Mount in reference to 2 temples said to have stood there in antiquity. This very compound was at the heart of the Israeli-Palestine conflict last year and escalated into an 11-day war between Israel and the Hamas group controlling the Gaza Strip. The war led to the deaths of at least 260 Palestinians, 13 Israelis, and significant destruction in the Gaza Strip. Also at this hour, long power cuts, acute shortage of food and essentials have led to weeks of widespread anti-government demonstrations, while the calls for President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to resign are stronger than ever. And now fuel rationing, Sri Lankans struggles as crisis worsens. Cash-strapped Sri Lanka imposed fuel rationing in yet another series of worsening economic crisis. Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, which accounts for 2/3 of the retail fuel market, has now imposed limits on fuel an individual can buy. It has also banned pumping fuel into cans to prevent people from stocking up. The announcement came when most pumping stations were already out of petrol, and the ones that were open always had really long queues. That's not all. The country's main cooking gas retailer, Litro Gas, says it is completely out of stock but hopes to get new supplies by Monday to resume distribution. Further, households are experiencing nearly 12-hour-long power cuts, and there's a massive shortage of essentials due to falling value of the Sri Lankan rupee. The fuel shortage is another worsening of the economic crisis that has sparked widespread demonstrations calling for President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's resignation. Tens of thousands of people kept up a protest outside Rajapaksa's office for a 7th straight day Friday, demanding he quit over the economic hardships suffered by the country's 22 million residents. Check out this report from WION correspondent Dasunia Thauda from Colombo.
Sri Lanka Ceylon Petroleum Corporation today announced officially that it is planning to ration fuel across the country. However, many fuel stations run by the CPC, as you can see right behind me, has run out of petrol and diesel. Nevertheless, citizens across the country, in a desperate move, are even willing to stand in line for hours, at times even exceeding 2 hours, to obtain the bare minimum of fuel here in the country. Sri Lanka has been reporting shortages of not only fuel but also of gas and certain commodities over the past few months due to its worsening economic crisis.
North Korea has unveiled a glamorous high-rise apartment building which now adorn Pyongyang's skyline. 80-story skyscraper is part of Kim Jong-un's latest attempt to turn the capital into quote-unquote people-first city. But more than a dream come true, the building has turned people's nightmares into reality. Watch our next report to know more.
An 80-story skyscraper in North Korea's capital, completed in the past week, is the latest in a push by leader Kim Jong-un to turn Pyongyang into what state media calls a people-first city. Glamorous high-rise apartment buildings now adorn Pyongyang's skyline, and for many outside the country, living in the penthouse might be considered the dream. But what if you had to take the stairs up and down every day? According to defectors from the country, that nightmare is a daily reality. Defector Jung Si-woo says that people who live in these penthouses are poor rather than rich, and that the water can't be pumped up because of low water pressure. He also said his friend who lives on the 28th floor of a 40-story building had never once used a lift in his life because they never worked. Housing is assigned in the socialist state, while the buying and selling of apartments is technically illegal. But historically, few people have ever wanted to live on the highest floors. While the power supply has improved significantly under Kim, North Korea still grapples with shortages and sometimes shoddy infrastructure. Many have turned to individual solar panels during the blackouts, which is only enough to power small electronics. On Wednesday, state media said that out of 50,000 planned new apartments in Pyongyang, 10,000 had already been completed. And though Kim has vowed to improve construction quality, experts caution that there's still a long way to go.
Let's move on to some news from the world of sports. The saga surrounding Joe Root and England's Test captaincy is finally over as the 31-year-old on Friday decided to step down from the role after almost 5 years at the helm amid pressure from a number of his predecessors. Root is England's most successful captain, but pressure had been building following a wretched run of results over the last 15 months. England won their first 3 tests of 2021, but since then have managed to win just once. Root continued to score runs by the bucketful and ended 2021 with a haul of over 1,700 runs that saw him named the ICC Test Cricketer of the Year. He managed to survive the purge after the 4-0 Ashes drubbing, but the series defeat in West Indies last month was the final nail in his coffin. He attempted to stay on despite criticism from former captains Michael Atherton and Nasser Hussain, among others, but walked away this morning. In a statement released by the England-Wales Cricket Board, Root said, and I quote, "It has been the most challenging decision I have had to make in my career, but having discussed this with my family and those closest to me, I know the timing is right. I am immensely proud to have captained my country and will look back on the past 5 years with enormous pride. It has been an honor to have done the job and to have been a custodian of what is the pinnacle of English cricket. I have loved leading my country, but recently it has hit home how much of a toll it has taken on me and the impact it has had on me away from the game." End of quote. There is no clear front-runner at the moment to replace Root, with Ben Stokes non-committal due to injury issues. England are also in the market for a new head coach and director of cricket, with Chris Silverwood and Ashley Giles sacked post the Ashes debacle. Justin Langer is currently the favourite to take over the head coach role. Cristiano Ronaldo may need to patent his famous celebration routine. A young footballer pulled off the iconic move after scoring for Manchester United's under-12 team. Brand Ronaldo, though, won't be fretting about copyright infringement this time. The young footballer in question was in fact his son, Cristiano Jr., and is a chip off the old block like his illustrious father. Take a look and tell us who did it better as we say thank you for watching and goodbye.
Israel claims to have destroyed a rocket launching site used by the Hamas.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made no mention of any halt to the offensive.
We at WION have tracked this story from the word go. WION reports on the latest health threat before the world.
People diagnosed with the coronavirus in Russia may be deported back to their home countries.
The looting started early Saturday.
South Africa is witnessing riots.
Hopping through a Taliban petrol now.
Hours of non-stop live broadcast. The most extensive coverage. Biggest team of reporters on ground.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the world's biggest vaccination drive.
India will have nearly 120 million doses.
We know that our shared planet is changing for the worse.
We need constructive dialogue. It's time, it's time, it's time.
Protests like these are now a frequent
A friendship that has stood the test of time, dehyphenating geopolitical equations and focusing on bilateral issues.
The place where I'm standing will be the site of the opening battle.
As you can see, the reserve forces are getting ready. They're picking up the weapons here.
Ringside, Ukrainian military drills. The Ukraine conflict is intensifying. WION brings you all sides of the story.
The reserve forces are
One of the many
getting
protest
ready.
marches.
And they will
It's code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker, weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time. Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God help us all if you fail to prove us wrong. God help us.
One trillion species, 7.8 billion humans, 1.9 million species extinct, one planet. Where are we heading? What should we do?
Many other this is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast. I'm Ross Cullen, joining you live from Paris, and these are the top headlines this hour. Moscow warns it will step up missile attacks on Kiev in response to what it said were sorties across the border, targeting a military factory near the Ukrainian capital overnight. China must pay a greater price for backing Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a senior United States senator says during a trip to Taiwan. More than 150 Palestinians injured in clashes with Israeli police at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Shanghai residents scuffle with hazmat-suited police, videos on social media show, providing a rare glimpse into rising anger in the megacity over punishing COVID lockdowns. And Joe Root resigns as England's Test cricket captain after a rollercoaster year that ended in a torrid run of results, including an Ashes drubbing and defeat in the West Indies. It's been 51 days since the war in Ukraine began, and Russia has once again changed its military strategy. Moscow says it has hit a plant, making anti-aircraft and anti-ship missiles outside Kiev. This attack comes weeks after withdrawing operations from the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, and its surrounding areas. Russia made the concession during the peace negotiations in Turkey, and this U-turn comes after the Kremlin accused Ukraine of targeting Russian border towns. The Defence Ministry said that the scale of the missile strikes against Kiev will increase in response to any, it terms, terrorist attacks on Russian territory. The ministry also added that Russian troops hit a military factory outside Kiev late on Thursday.
Last night, high-precision, long-range, sea-based caliber missiles hit a military facility on the outskirts of Kiev. As a result of the attack on the Vizar machine-building plant in Zuliani, workshops for the production and repair of long-range and medium-range anti-aircraft missile systems, as well as anti-ship missiles, were destroyed. The number and scale of missile strikes against targets in Kiev will increase in response to any terror attacks or sabotage committed by the Kiev nationalist regime on the Russian territory.
Meanwhile, Ukraine has denied bombing a village in Russia's Bryansk region, which is not far from its border. Kiev instead has accused Russia of staging the incident to stir up anti-Ukrainian hysteria in the country. Amidst the claims and counterclaims, Russian troops continue to bomb Ukrainian cities in the south and east. Residents of Odessa, Mariupol and Kharkiv have been bracing for renewed attacks. And more than 4.7 million Ukrainians have fled their country so far. Germany has impounded the world's largest super yacht, which reportedly belonged to the Russian oligarch Alisher Usmanov. According to reports, the 150-metre-long Dilbar has an estimated value of nearly $600 million. The boat had been docked for repairs in Hamburg since October last year, but authorities had run into a legal hurdle as the yacht was owned by the oligarch's sister. Following the widespread Western sanctions on Russian oligarch family members, European authorities could take hold of the super yacht. Alisher Usmanov is one of the most prominent Russian oligarchs who has come under scrutiny due to his links with the English Premier League football club Everton, just like former Chelsea football club owner Roman Abramovich. Two of Abramovich's yachts have been identified for seizure in the islands of Antigua and Barbuda. At least a dozen Russian oligarchs' yachts have so far been seized or identified for seizure, and mainly in Europe. Spain has impounded 4 yachts of Russian oligarchs, which includes names like Alexander Mikheyev, who is the CEO of Russia's defence conglomerate, and Igor Sechin, former Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, who's considered to be a close ally of Vladimir Putin. Here in France, there's also been the seizure of one of Sechin's yachts. In total, France has impounded 3 vessels. Italy has also seized 3 of the Russian yachts, while the United Kingdom has taken 2. The United Kingdom has signed a controversial new scheme to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The plan has been criticised by international human rights groups as shockingly ill-conceived and contrary to international obligations.
Britain could send tens of thousands of asylum seekers to Rwanda under a new partnership signed by the two countries on Thursday. The policy is aimed at tackling spiralling illegal immigration into the UK, where last year more than 28,000 people crossed from mainland Europe, many with the help of organised crime gangs. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the resettlement plan will apply to anyone who has arrived illegally since January the 1st.
This innovative approach, driven by our shared humanitarian impulse and made possible by Brexit freedoms, will provide safe and legal routes for asylum while disrupting the business model of the gangs.
Britain's Home Secretary Priti Patel was in Kigali to sign the deal, which will see the UK initially contribute just under $160 million. She said it was a substantial investment in Rwanda's economic development. Rwanda's Foreign Minister Vincent Biruta said migrants would be given education and employment opportunities, and the chance to make new lives as full members of our communities.
And for those who don't wish to make Rwanda their new home, they will be facilitated to return to their country of origin or settle in other receiving countries.
The scheme drew swift and strong criticism from opposition politicians in the UK, with one calling it extortionate as well as unworkable and unethical. Johnson said he knew the plan would be criticised and face legal challenges, but he promised to do whatever it took to deliver it.
Russia has warned it might deploy nuclear and hypersonic missiles to the Baltic region if Sweden and Finland join NATO. Here's our full report.
Russia warned on Thursday that if Sweden and Finland join NATO, Russia would deploy nuclear weapons and hypersonic missiles in an exclave in the heart of Europe. Both Finland, which shares an 810-mile border with Russia, and Sweden are considering joining the US-led military alliance. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, said that should Sweden and Finland join NATO, then Russia would have to strengthen its land, naval and air forces in the Baltic Sea, where Russia has its Kaliningrad exclave sandwiched between Poland and Lithuania. Medvedev also said he hoped Finland and Sweden would see sense, or they'd have to live with nuclear weapons and hypersonic missiles close to home. There could be no more talk of a nuclear-free Baltic, he said. One town on Finland's border with Russia is Imatra, home to 26,000 people casting a nervous eye towards their eastern neighbour. It used to welcome Russian tourists, but since Moscow launched what it calls a special military operation in Ukraine, Imatra fears receiving less benign arrivals. That worry has prompted Finland to consider joining NATO, which would be a major pivot in its security arrangements. Katri Lat is a resident of Imatra.
We have so far seen Imatra as a very safe place, and we still think so. But I believe the thoughts of the people here have now changed, in the way that a small fear has now appeared. And Russia, the country next to us, is a little different to other countries, and you cannot necessarily always trust what they say. So maybe people should be prepared for the fact that we might have to leave quickly.
Finland has long avoided disagreements with Russia for the sake of friendly relations. But Prime Minister Sanna Marin said on Wednesday it must be ready for all kinds of responses from Moscow now it's weighing NATO membership. She said a decision would be made in the coming weeks.
Clashes have broken out between Palestinians and Israeli security forces at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque, and more than 150 people have been injured in the violence. The first face-off in the area since the start of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Israeli police said dozens of mosque men marched into the mosque, chanting and setting off fireworks before throwing stones towards the Western Wall, which is considered the holiest site where Jews can pray. Israeli police said at least 3 of their officers have been hurt in the clashes. Tensions are high because Israel has been carrying out arrests and military raids in the West Bank after 4 attacks in Israel in the past 3 weeks, killing 14 people, most of them civilians. Now, some of the attacks in Israel were carried out by Arab citizens linked to the Islamic State group. Others were by Palestinians supported by militant groups like Hamas. In that same period of time, however, at least 18 Palestinians have been killed in the raids conducted by Israeli forces, including children. The site of today's clashes, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, is Islam's third holiest site. Jews refer to it as the Temple Mount, in reference to 2 temples said to have stood there in antiquity. This very compound was at the heart of the Israeli-Palestine conflict last year and escalated into an 11-day war between Israel and the Hamas group controlling the Gaza Strip. The war led to the deaths of at least 260 Palestinians, 13 Israelis, and also the significant destruction of the Gaza Strip. Staying on Israel, and the country's increased its military capabilities by installing an iron beam. This is touted to be the world's first energy-based weapons system, which uses a laser to strike down incoming missiles and mortars. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is expected to arrive in India next week in a state visit that will aim to highlight a successful India-UK partnership. The visit, which is yet to be formally announced by Downing Street, follows the successful completion of 4 out of the 26 chapters in the ongoing India-UK Free Trade Agreement negotiations. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Johnson are expected to take stock of the negotiations and mandate a timeline for the possible completion of the process, which was initially set for the end of the year. Johnson's visit expected to be on April the 21st and the 22nd. Well, there will likely be bilateral discussions and interactions during the visit with Indian business leaders. The visit is also likely to cover agreements across a variety of sectors, including defence, security and education. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is most likely to feature in the discussions as well, but other regional matters like the situation in Afghanistan and the UK's Indo-Pacific tilt will also be high on the agenda. Officials say discussions over India's stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict have remained cordial and respectful of New Delhi's hopes for a peaceful resolution. Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Johnson last met in person on the sidelines of the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow in November last year. Their talks then focused on India's UK climate partnership and a review of the 2030 roadmap the two countries signed during a virtual summit back in May 2021. Johnson's visit had been long overdue. His previous visits have been cancelled twice before due to the COVID-19 pandemic. People have started taking energy prices into their own hands by switching to community-led energy production, as the rise in prices does not seem to be slowing down. Hundreds of small groups that are creating energy around the United Kingdom are demanding that the government make more effort to support them.
Energy production is going off-grid and into the heart of the community as households brace themselves for energy price hikes. The country has seen a massive surge in the number of people who are signing up to join community schemes that generate electricity. Around 350 local councils in the UK are supporting efforts aimed at making a legal change that would make it easier for community energy groups to sell power. The wind turbines used for this are entirely owned by the customers.
The turbine is now completed. It's generating energy.
You have a chunk of this.
That's right.
It's your turbine.
I have a small chunk of that turbine. I put up just under £1,000. It'll take about 100 and something pounds off my energy bill a year.
As per the experts, community energy has the potential to become a part of a wider consumer movement.
I think the time has come that, we don't need our energy assets to be owned by large companies. They'll always be a part of the mix, but I think consumers can increasingly be at the table as well.
However, there are also some who feel that the government could do more when it comes to supporting community-generated energy.
The reason that community energy has stalled is that the government, whilst saying that it's really important and that they really support it, have done nothing. They promised a plan in the net zero strategy and there was no plan.
The roofs of residential buildings are also being assessed to see whether they can be fitted with solar panels.
We have to, in some instances, limit the size of the installation we can put on the roof because whilst we benefit from the economies of scale in installing on at that site, any excess generation spills into the grid for which we get very little return. If we were able to sell that electricity locally at more of a market rate, then we will be able to use buildings which had very large roofs.
However, there are plenty of places where this technology can be used. Members of these communities feel that everyone who has the ability should be looking into getting community energy schemes locally, since there are so many local authority buildings and houses that are perfect for installing solar panels. In the Brecon Beacons, the stream is successfully generating power for users, but how does it work? The water comes in through smaller pipes which generate electricity through the turbine. Some energy customers feel that there should be more of a mix of big providers and community initiatives. So as prices rise, communities could cut their bills if they can install their own energy technology and tap into people's power. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
We know that electrification is a hot trend in the automotive market. Companies around the world are betting big on electric vehicles. Not surprisingly, some exciting electric cars are being showcased at the 2022 New York International Auto Show. We leave you now with a roundup of the show. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Electric vehicles are dominating the 2022 New York International Auto Show. One of the top performing EVs at the event is the Hyundai Ioniq 5. The vehicle won the World Car of the Year award. It also bagged the World Electric Car and World Car Design trophies at the show. An all-electric updated SUV Chrysler Airflow and the hybrid Alfa Romeo Tonale also caught the attention of visitors. The Tonale has about 30 miles of electric range before switching to gas. It's no secret that companies and buyers are going to electric for a variety of reasons.
Well, one of the big things that's happening is sort of a general move towards electrification. It's better for the planet, that kind of thing. But also there's a real spike in consumer interest in electric cars right now because of rising gas prices. With an average price of over $4 a gallon in the United States right now, at Cox Automotive, we saw a 69% jump in interest in electric cars in March versus January. So people are really looking at their options so they don't have to burn down their entire budgets on gasoline.
Another thing we see at the New York Auto Show is that there are a lot of electric car startups. Each one of them is trying to establish itself as a unique entity.
One of them is Indie EV, and they've got a focus on gaming. They've got a supercomputer under the hood that you can use for gaming purposes. Whether that's really relevant to car shoppers or just a gimmick that entices investors remains to be seen. One thing we have seen, though, is it is very, very hard to build a car and sell it to the public, but it's very, very easy to build a concept and build some hype. So I guess we'll see how many of the car makers here actually go to production.
The ongoing 2022 New York International Auto Show will end on April 24th.
There are many other... this is right, Arab.
Israel claims to have destroyed a rocket launching site used by the Hamas.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made no mention of any halt to the offensive.
We at WION have tracked this story from the word go.
WION reports on the latest health threat before the world.
People diagnosed with the coronavirus in Russia may be deported back to their home countries.
The looting started early Saturday.
South Africa is witnessing riots.
Hoping to a Taliban has gone down.
Hours of non-stop live broadcast. The most extensive coverage. Biggest team of reporters on ground.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the world's biggest vaccination drive.
India will have nearly 120 million doses.
We know that our shared planet is changing for the worse.
We need constructive dialogue. It's time, it's time, it's time.
Protests like these are now a frequent
A friendship that has stood the test of time, dehyphenating geopolitical equations and focusing on bilateral issues.
Place where I'm standing will be the site of the opening battle. As you can
can see the reserve forces are getting ready. They're picking up the weapons here.
Ringside, Ukrainian military drills. The Ukraine conflict is intensifying. WION brings you all sides of the story.
The reserve forces are
One of the many
getting
protest
ready.
marches.
And
It's code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. Wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God help us all. If you fail to prove us wrong, God help us.
Thank you very much for staying with us and welcome back. We are glad you're watching WION while there's one. Welcome to this broadcast. My name is Eric Njoka. Coming up in this edition of Today Tonight. CIA Director William Burns says that the threat of Russia potentially using tactical or low-yield nuclear weapons in Ukraine cannot be taken lightly. But the CIA has not seen a lot of practical evidence reinforcing that concern. A Ukrainian military factory outside Kyiv that produced missiles allegedly used to hit Russia's Moskva warship was partly destroyed by overnight Russian strikes. The European Union terms Russia's decision to expel 18 of its diplomats unjustified. Earlier, the bloc kicked out some of Moscow's representatives for spying. President Emmanuel Macron clashes with his rival Marine Le Pen over her plan to ban women from wearing the Islamic headscarf in public ahead of the second round of elections. Shanghai residents scuffle with hazmat-suited police, ordering them to surrender their homes to COVID-19 patients as discontent rises over China's inflexible COVID response. And the death toll in the South Africa floods rises to 395 as rescuers widen search for the dozens missing in the deadliest storm that struck the country's coastal city of Durban in living memory. The director of US's intelligence services has said that the threat of Russia launching a nuke attack on Ukraine cannot be taken lightly, but asserts that the CIA has not seen a lot of practical evidence reinforcing that concern. CIA Director William Burns made the comments while addressing a tech conference in Georgia.
Mr. Burns, Associated Press, can you say what is the reason or the point of your visit?
I'll be back in a little bit.
None of us can take lightly the threat posed by a potential resort to tactical nuclear weapons or low-yield nuclear weapons.
Tactical and low-yield nuclear weapons refer to those designed for use on the battlefield, and experts suggest that Russia has some 2,000 of these weapons, which can be delivered by air, naval and ground forces. Ever since Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the country's nuclear deterrent forces on alert, Kremlin officials have repeatedly warned that Russia would use nuclear weapons if there's a threat for existence to their country. Even earlier this week, Deputy Chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, warned NATO that Moscow would deploy nuclear weapons and hypersonic missiles in Kaliningrad, a Russian enclave in the heart of Europe, if Sweden and Finland join the Atlantic Alliance. The CIA's comments come at a crucial time. Nearly 2 months have passed since Russia launched its offensive against Ukraine and has not been able to make any victories yet, and the Russian troops have incurred heavy losses. It's been 51 days into the war in Ukraine, and Russia has once again changed its military strategy. Moscow says it has hit a plant making anti-aircraft and anti-ships missiles outside Kyiv. This attack comes weeks after withdrawing operations from the Ukrainian capital and its surrounding areas, and Russia made the concession during the peace negotiations in Turkey. This U-turn comes after Kremlin accused Ukraine of targeting Russian border towns. The Defense Ministry says that the scale of missile strikes against Kyiv will increase in response to what it terms as terrorist attacks carried out by Kyiv on Russian territory. It added that Russian troops also hit a military factory outside Kyiv late on Thursday.
Last night, high-precision, long-range, sea-based caliber missiles hit a military facility on the outskirts of Kiev. As a result of the attack on the Vizar machine-building plant in Zuliani, workshops for the production and repair of long-range and medium-range anti-aircraft missile systems, as well as anti-ship missiles, were destroyed. The number and scale of missile strikes against targets in Kiev will increase in response to any terror attacks or sabotage committed by the Kiev nationalist regime on the Russian territory.
Ukraine has denied bombing a village in Russia's Bryansk region, not far from its border Kyiv. Instead, accused Russia of staging the incident to stir up anti-Ukrainian hysteria in the country. Amidst the claims and counterclaims, Russian troops continue to bomb Ukrainian cities in the south and east. Residents of Odessa, Mariupol and Kharkiv have been bracing for days for new Russian attacks. The United Nations estimates that over 4.7 million Ukrainians have fled their country since the Russian offensive began. After building an Iron Dome, Israel has increased its military capabilities by installing an Iron Beam. This is started to be the world's first energy-based weapon system, which uses a laser to strike down incoming missiles and mortars. Take a look. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has set the corridors of the tech world abuzz again after hinting at a takeover of one of the world's biggest social media giants, Twitter, in what he calls a fight for free speech. But company sources now say Twitter CEO, in a meeting with employees yesterday, said the company is not being quote-unquote held hostage. Twitter's chief executive officer Parag Agrawal yesterday took questions from employees on company's in-house Slack messaging service after the world's richest man offered to buy Twitter for more than $40 billion. Agrawal told Twitter personnel that the board was continuing to review Musk's offer, but it could only share limited details, adding that the company was not being held hostage by news of Elon Musk's offer. When asked how the decision had been made to offer Musk a board seat, Agrawal said that the board was working in interest of shareholders. The Twitter CEO was also reported saying Twitter stands for way more than one person or one human and any human. And I have a strong point of view that people who are critical of our service, their voice is something that we must emphasize so that we can learn and get better. This is after Elon Musk shared a copy of his offer on Twitter yesterday, saying this is not a hostile takeover, but a fight for free speech. What Musk is offering is $54.20 per share, which rounds up to a 54% premium over Twitter's January valuation. Musk says this is his final offer. He is confident Twitter's shareholders will love it. Musk's offer to buy Twitter has sparked concerns among Tesla investors. Experts believe that the electric car maker could suffer if its CEO becomes distracted by the takeover. There's also fear that Musk might sell even more of his Tesla stakes to fund his bid in Twitter. The impact was felt in the markets yesterday, with Tesla stocks falling over 9% since he disclosed his stake in Twitter. Experts also worry that the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission might not take kindly to the bid. The SpaceX founder and CEO is already in trouble with the watchdog over his 2018 tweets on taking Tesla private. Experts believe that the SEC might now scrutinize not only Elon Musk's tweets, but also investigate Twitter's functioning and also finances, something the firm will not want hanging over it. Meanwhile, analysts are also worried about how Elon Musk will fund his potential deal with Twitter. Some believe that it could include stock sales, while others say that it could include massive loans. Musk has already said that he has the assets to buy Twitter, but has not provided details. The fortunes of the world's richest person consists largely of stocks at Tesla and SpaceX. You remember he sold Tesla shares worth over $16 billion late last year, of which he paid almost $11 billion in taxes. Now, amid the conflict in Ukraine, a piece of history is still flying in the sky, which is dated way back to World War II, when some other nations joined hands to defeat the Nazis. Take a look.
There's a lump in the throat and a warm feeling, you know, but you brought back something that's so important to our history. And the first time these engines fire up and the Merlin roars again and you see it, you know, taxi off to the end of the runway, it's magic.
Totally. I was a great fan of the Air Transport Auxiliary and all the women pilots who used to ferry them during the war and tried to do them proud.
The torrential downpour in South Africa may have subsided, but the trail of destruction has left a deadly impact in the lives of South Africans. The death toll is inching towards 400 and many still remain missing, while the government gives no indication on how many people have still not been found. South African authorities have said that they are releasing emergency funds to help tens of thousands of people left without shelter, water and power after flash floods washed away homes and roads, wreaking devastation on the country's east coast. Volunteers are also trying to put a lead on the disaster. They are distributing basic necessities such as food packets and water. The record rainfall has inundated parts of South Africa, especially the municipality of Durban. Nearly 41,000 people have been affected by the deadly floods, while local community members say that the state of disaster is unprecedented.
The water just started putting, the lake exploded and the grounds exploded, Amlazi River exploded. It all happened at once. Within 30 minutes the water was shooting up. But we tried to put barriers, it didn't help.
This satellite image of before and after the heavy rainfall emphasizes the scale of the devastation. The province was declared a disaster area after shipping containers, bridges and even roads were washed away. Rescue teams have shared a grim image of the search operation with recoveries of only corpses.
But the devastation is quite vast. I mean, every single little stream or tributary turned out into a raging river. There's a lot of houses that have collapsed, a lot of buildings that have been washed away. The community is affected in a massive way. I think it's going to take... I've been working in search and rescue for almost 20 years. I am a Natal boy, so I'm from here, and this is the worst disaster that I've seen hit Natal in 20 years.
While Durban is overflowing with water, residents are reporting scarcity in drinking water. People are scrambling to get clean water from broken pipes and washed away tanks.
It's been so hard for us, and even water, electricity in some other areas there isn't any water, electricity. As you can see, how we suffering. Yeah, to get water. We're coming from Amandletu to fetch water.
Scientists and climate experts feel Africa's southeastern coast is on the brink of a major disaster, with global warming adding to the woes. The situation is expected to worsen in the near future. We're still talking about the effects of climate change. When a glacier the size of Rome collapsed in eastern Antarctica last month, it triggered alarms across the world. One of the major causes was global warming. But what phenomenon actually led to this collapse left the scientists wondering. A recent study has shown that the atmospheric rivers, also known as rivers in the sky, are causing extreme temperatures, surface melt and sea ice disintegrations. Atmospheric river is a long plume of moisture that transports warm air and water vapor from the tropics to other parts of the earth and is playing a great role in destabilizing ice shelves on the Antarctic Peninsula. This is not the first time such conditions have been witnessed. Back in 1995 and 2002, during the collapse of Antarctica's Larsen A and B ice shelves, a similar phenomenon was observed. And now, with the projected warming of Earth's temperature, the biggest remaining ice shelf in the Antarctic Peninsula, Larsen C, is also at risk of total collapse. The authors of the study, published in the Nature journal Communications Earth and Environment, used algorithms, climate models and satellite observations to determine that 60% of the peninsula's calving events were triggered by atmospheric rivers in the last 2 decades. What does this mean for the already dire threat of rising sea level? Scientists say that the collapse of Larsen C would spell bad news for the sea level around the planet. Ice shelves can break off and can cause sea level to rise, but also noted that they do not add a huge volume to the levels. The reason is because they are already floating in the water. But more importantly, ice shelves play a critical role in preventing a much larger sea level rise. These inferences are proposed from one study. Scientists are still looking for more proof on what role the atmospheric rivers play. They say that similar events in the future will provide more clarity. Well, for better understanding of the crucial climate concern, we tell you the importance of ice shelves and the role they play in our ecosystem. Take a look.
Ice shelves are permanent floating extensions of an ice sheet connected to a landmass. Most are along the coast of Antarctica, but they can also be found in Greenland, Canada, and parts of Russia. They form when ice from enormous ice sheets approaches the sea as a glacier. If the ocean is cold enough, an ice shelf pushed forwards by glaciers does not melt. Over time it can grow, gaining ice mass. Sometimes it can shrink. Until recently, there was a rough balance between the amount ice shelves shed and accumulated. But now, the ice is melting, and melting fast, especially in the Antarctic. Scientists say warmer air and higher ocean temperatures are behind the change. Warm air melts the surface of the shelf, forming pools. The water trickles downwards through small cracks, making them wider. Meanwhile, warmer water circulates under the floating shelf, melting it from below, expanding the cracks further. Finally, an iceberg breaks away from the ice shelf, a process called calving. Scientists believe it's vital that ice shelves do not disintegrate. Without an ice shelf to slow their speed, glaciers would accelerate and flow into the ocean, contributing to a dramatic sea level rise.
We've seen the fallout of Western sanctions against Russia, but while the world is concerned about the victims of war, a couple of Russian influencers have become self-proclaimed fashion victims. French fashion house Chanel announced in March that it was closing down stores in Russia to comply with Western sanctions, and Russian influencers have revolted. They are chopping up $7,000 Chanel bags. You'll have to see it to believe it.
A snip here, a chop there, and a couple of $1,000 go down the drain. While we all shudder and gasp and shriek, these women are cutting away to glory. This is fashion blasphemy.
Chanel House does not respect their clients. Why do we have to respect Chanel House?
Let's be clear, this is not a revolt. These are not victims of war. They are self-proclaimed victims of fashion, who can't get their hands on their precious Chanel goods. In March, the French House announced that it would shut down its stores in the country and even stop selling its products to people who intend to take them to Russia. We're not sure if the high ranks within the Kremlin were even the least bit perturbed. But these Russian influencers with hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram are fighting the fashionable fight. They are livid. How dare Chanel stop selling its luxury handbags to its ardent fans? Never mind the war in Europe. Never mind the humanitarian catastrophe. How dare Chanel leave its loyalists hanging? The scissor-wielding self-proclaimed activists are accusing the brand of so-called Russophobia, or fear of Russia. Well, to us it looks like it is these poor bags who should be afraid of these serial choppers. Chanel, meanwhile, in a statement said that we are currently working on improving this approach and we apologize for any misunderstanding this may have caused. Welcoming all our clients, regardless of where they come from, is a priority for Chanel. We're certain Chanel isn't too worried about its bags being in jeopardy, but we couldn't help but notice that one influencer matched her garden shears with her outfit, all the while chopping up her Chanel. So not a complete fashion blasphemy, right?
Bye-bye.
Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
They say heaven resides in the Swiss Alps. Then our next story can be termed as a musical match made in heaven. A pianist gave a sky-high performance at Europe's highest train station with a grand piano placed on a mountain top surrounded by the Swiss plateau. We leave you with this performance. Thank you very much for watching this edition of Today Tonight.
WION, now available.
Israel claims to have destroyed a rocket launching site used by the Hamas.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made no mention of any halt to the offensive.
We at WION have tracked this story from the word go.
WION reports on the latest health threat before the world.
People diagnosed with the coronavirus in Russia may be deported back to their home countries.
The looting started early Saturday.
South Africa is witnessing riots.
And hopping through a Taliban patrol now.
Hours of non-stop live broadcasts. The most extensive coverage. Biggest team of reporters on ground.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the world's biggest vaccination drive.
India will have nearly 120 million doses.
We know that our shared planet is changing for the worse.
We need constructive dialogue. It's time, it's time, it's time.
Protests like these are now a frequent
A friendship that has stood the test of time, dehyphenating geopolitical equations and focusing on bilateral issues.
The place where I'm standing will be the site of the opening battle.
See, the reserve forces are getting ready. They're picking up the weapons here.
Ringside, Ukrainian military drills. The Ukraine conflict is intensifying. WION brings you all sides of the story.
The reserve forces are
one of the many
getting
protest
ready.
marches.
It's code red for humanity.